Time for This Week now on BBC One, and you've been warned, feathers will fly.
Tonight on This Week, we attempt to answer all the big questions, like, where's all the chicken gone? Deep fat fryer Jane Noor runs up a finger-licking good political week.
This chicken looks so yummy. And unlike KFC, these guys have actually got some. Oh, sorry, mate.
George Buttcluck Galloway ruffles a few feathers and moves forward to a Jezza foreign policy.
Labour shouldn't clip their diplomatic wings by chickening out on a hard Brexit.
And cocky comedian Jeff Norcott thinks we've all gone mother-clucking crazy. Michael and Liz, you boneless dips, get your family buckets to the ready. This week's Come Home to Roost. Evening all, welcome to This Week. And at a time when there has been much in the public prints about dear Jezza's innocent dealings with a Czech spy masquerading as a diplomat, and you knew that's what these fiendish commies got up to during the Cold War, I think it only fair to fess up and admit that I too was one of their useless idiots. Mr. Corbyn was given the codename Agent Cobb. My secret moniker was Agent Knob. I don't know why, but there you are. They said it suited me. As they plied me with unlimited Blue Nun, I freely revealed the scheduled departure of the 9:45 from Chipping Sodbury to Paddington. 9:45 as it happens. When is the 10 o'clock news, they demanded. 10 o'clock, I blurted out. Clearly they could see I was on the inside track. Does anyone watch This Week, they wanted to know. I burst out laughing. No, we thought not, said my handlers. Thus did I pass on some of our most vital secrets to our sworn enemies. And unlike the saintly Jezza, who wasn't paid to tell them anything because even if he was minded to, which he wasn't, he knew nothing worth paying for anyway. I was of a more materialistic bent. Yes, I betrayed our nation for a year's supply of Blue Nun vodka and a huge tin of caviar for Molly the dog. She likes her Russian treats, you know. And when you do late night TV on the BBC, you need to find some way to supplement your pittance of an income. Speaking of those that you'd pay just to shut up, I'm joined on the sofa by two folks so out of the loop that even communist diplomats with huge expense accounts couldn't be bothered to give them the time of day, even over a cup of tea and a greasy spoon. I speak, of course, of Liz #4% Candle and Michael #Choo Patillo. Welcome to you both.
Good evening, Andrew.
Your moment of the week, Michael.
The relevant select committee, including all its Conservatives, rejected the government's nomination to be the new chairman of the Charity Commission.
Yes, indeed.
Baroness Stoll. Now, I think charities are a pretty serious subject nowadays. We can see a couple of them disintegrating before our eyes. But there's also another issue that some so-called charities actually have very unacceptable agendas and masquerade as charities and need to be unmasked. In other words, this is a very, very serious business. Baroness Stoll has been rejected not least because she has no experience of regulation or of charities. And I think it illustrates that the government has no idea why and cannot even understand its own priorities.
Do we know yet if the government's going to ignore the committee and go ahead with that appointment?
Well, the government has said that. Whether that will be the case, time will tell.
No, it's an interesting issue. And as you say, never have charities been in the spotlight more, or never has it been more important to get the proper regulator
right person
in the Charities Commission. Liz, your moment.
The failure of the UN Security Council tonight to agree a ceasefire in Syria, despite the latest unimaginable horror emerging.
Just when you
in
think it
Eastern
couldn't
Ghouta.
get worse, it gets worse.
Russia is clearly again blocking the resolution despite some serious amendments. And it was very interesting tonight that the French ambassador said, if a resolution is not agreed, it will be a devastating blow to confidence in the Security Council and possibly even the death knell of the UN, a serious and severe warning. And we have to make sure that isn't right.
That's very big.
It
It is. To say that. Very well. Two very good moments. One domestic, one foreign. That's how balanced we are. Now, it's rarer than a KFC chicken these days, but yesterday the leader of the opposition used PMQs to quiz Theresa May about Brexit. You always get the impression Jezza doesn't really give a monkey's about it. He's more a stop the war unless Russia, Syria or Hezbollah started it kind of guy. And though Tory dither, drift and indecision about Brexit should be fertile ground for any opposition to exploit, well, the problem might be that he's not entirely simpatico with the pro-EU mainstream of his own party. So best just give it a miss. Which raises an interesting question. What would foreign policy be under a Corbyn government? Despite all the daily party political argy-bargy, there's been a pretty consistent Labour-Tory bipartisanship since World War II. Pro-NATO, pro-America, pro-Commonwealth, pro-free trade, pro-globalisation, and until recently pro-EU, though that road's often been a bit more rocky for both sides. So I think we can be sure that a Corbyn government would break that foreign policy consensus. Here's George Galloway with his take of the week.
People accuse Jeremy Corbyn of playing games over Brexit. But with a party deeply divided over the issue, he keeps his cards close to his chest for good reason. Nobody can achieve a Brexit which pleases everyone, so why not keep a poker face whilst Theresa May continues to play a terrible hand over in Brussels? Reports this morning that Corbyn intends to use a speech on Monday to show more of his hand on Brexit worries me. Providing Corbyn and the Labour Party can continue prevaricating, they can emerge unscathed from the Brexit battleground. By contrast, whatever Mrs May achieves will create interminable conflict in the Conservative Party and could be checkmate for her pathetic premiership. Never interrupt your enemy, Jeremy, whilst they're busy making a mistake. Speculation that the speech is going to herald a softer line on Brexit worry me further. Corbyn has an unlikely ally in Jacob Rees-Mogg. If the European Research Group's proposals are accepted by the government, we could make a clean break from the European Union, which is, I believe, what Jeremy Corbyn really wants, or ought to. A hard Brexit means a realignment of the stars, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Corbyn to revolutionise Britain's relations with the rest of the world. Unshackled from the little leagues on the continent, Corbyn could monopolise on his newfound freedom, realising his lifelong ambition of engagement with his allies in Latin America and Africa through the mechanism of the BRICS, an association of fast-growing, newly industrialised countries like China, India and South Africa. As part of a geopolitical alignment suited to his worldview, Mr. Corbyn could create a new socialist Pax Britannica. Instead of isolating so-called rogue states, Corbyn could engage with them. Only through dialogue can we hope to influence the behaviour of others. Mr. Corbyn could pivot Britain towards trading opportunities with parts of the world's economy that are on the up. Mr. Corbyn could also score points with the Labour grassroots by eliminating two unpopular, indeed reprehensible partnerships. One with the murderous Saudi regime, the other as poodle to Donald Trump's alt-right United States. What's more, with the Trump presidency on thin ice and Bernie Sanders in the ascendant, Jeremy Corbyn is the only British politician who could make that special relationship even more special. He could transform it from one that simply enables colonial access into a true transatlantic partnership of people not just corporations. Hard Brexit means everyone's a winner, Jeremy. So don't go soft on me now.
And from the beautiful Drafts Cafe in Haggerston to our drafty little studio here in Westminster, George Galloway joins us now. Welcome back to the programme,
Thank
George.
you.
If Mr Corbyn took a clear-cut, almost hard Brexit line, could he carry his party?
No, I mean, people like Liz and many, many others, more than 4%, maybe 74%, would be hostile to that. That's why I think he's been carefully playing this. And he ought to continue that, because that doesn't then burst open the Labour Party's divisions. And as I said, quoting Napoleon, never interrupt your enemy while he's busy making a mistake.
When they're displaying their divisions on the
Indeed,
Tory side.
indeed.
Liz, John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, he says Labour policy on Brexit is evolving. Do you think it's evolving in a softer direction, more in your direction?
Yes, I do. And I think you will see more next week, particularly around the customs union, and I hope it goes further still around the single market. I think the reason why is that the leadership is listening not just to party members, Labour voters and the trade unions, but understanding that I'm afraid a hard Brexit would simply finish the job that Thatcher begun on our manufacturing industries in the Midlands and the North, and undermine workers' rights and environmental standards, all of which are very important for the future of our economy, and the very strong argument that you cannot be an anti-austerity party if you're out of the single market and the customs union and our economy takes a hit.
George.
Well, if we go into the next election and the dichotomy is we're the Tories that withdrew from the European Union and they're Labour that tried to betray it, that's a disaster for Labour. 70% of Labour-held constituencies voted leave in the referendum. And if Labour can be fixed as the stab-in-the-back party, the party that betrayed the decision the British people made in the referendum, that'll be an electoral catastrophe. There'll be parts of London where it will be of benefit, but in the north, in the post-industrial wastelands of the Thatcher era, it'll be a complete catastrophe.
What do you make of this, Michael?
Well, I think George is absolutely right that Labour should not be interrupting their enemies while they're making mistakes. A couple of weeks ago on this programme, I said that I thought Corbyn would not want to be Prime Minister at this moment. I was howled down, not least by you. But I think George is kind of saying the same thing. Let the Tories get on and get to Brexit of whatever form, then the Labour Party is not responsible for what has happened. I don't believe there's going to be a hard Brexit, because in the end, I think the European Union and Britain, neither one will want to impose tariffs upon the other. I just don't think it's where the world is headed for. But I certainly think that Labour's best interest, Corbyn's best interest in particular, are to allow the Tories to get on with this for the next 2 years, to be hopelessly divided about it, and to pick up the settled consequences, the outcome.
What about George's wider vision of a Corbyn foreign policy, what it could be like? I mean, what George outlined, by and large, it has the benefit of being what Mr Corbyn believes. It may be right or wrong, but it is what he believes, isn't it?
Well, I don't think that we should be an anti-West, anti-American, anti-Europe isolationist party.
But that's your leader's position.
I don't think that you can build social democracy, let alone socialism, in one country if you don't understand that our economy is global, climate change, terrorism, migration can only be dealt with if you play a strong role in the international rules-based institutions that we set up. And I
but
think
George was arguing for a continued strong role, just a very different role.
And a very special relationship with the United States. I'm the great-grandson of the only woman in the 19th century who emigrated from the United States to Dundee, and you've seen Dundee. There's nothing anti-American about me. I want Corbyn and Sanders to make a really special relationship, one involving people and not just corporations, though of course corporations have their role, and far from isolation.
You also need to get Mr Sanders into the White House too.
The current polls are showing him.
Think he's going to run again?
He's going to run again, if he's still alive, of course. But that's true of Corbyn and true of all of us.
I thought that this part of George's film should be shown every hour during the coming election campaign as a Conservative Party political broadcast, unveiling what a Corbyn foreign policy would be like. With one footnote, if I may, George, you mentioned BRICS and the R stands for Russia, but you didn't mention whether you wanted to warmly embrace Russia, the murderous regime which is killing off civilians in large numbers in Syria at the moment. And I think this does represent quite a difficulty for you. The regimes that you would like to put your arm around, China you mentioned, with massive numbers of death penalties every year, highest
Appalling
number of death
record on
penalties.
human rights.
Even more than the United States.
Still, yes, many more than the United States.
Not many more.
Still displaying the poster of Mao Zedong, who murdered 50 million Chinese in Tiananmen Square.
You've obviously
still
not-
with
you've
Mao
obviously
on the
not-
Okay, no, let him
banknotes.
answer.
You've obviously not been hired yet as a consultant to Chinese business, but for your information, Britain's trying very hard to trade with China, and outside of the European Union will be in a better position to do it. Of course,
But
one
you
has to trade.
socialists have more in common with the Chinese and with the
one
Russians.
has to trade with all kinds of countries, and with the exception of Saudi Arabia, I'd be in favour of trading with them. And to trade with them, you have to have good relations. All the countries, 25 countries we have sanctions against at the moment, 18 of which we have invaded in the past.
Well, since you left,
all I'm asking
since
for,
you left Russia out of your little film, would you like to say what you feel about Russia's role in Syria at the moment?
you know, it's very cold outside tonight, and if it's warm indoors, it's because of Russian gas. Russia is an important trading partner and can be a still more important
We
trading.
don't take gas directly from Russia.
Well, across Europe.
Europe does. but
Across
we,
Europe.
We may get
so-
some
so-
indirectly through
so
a pipeline,
we do.
but we don't take it direct.
So
but let me ask you this:
murderous
why
regimes of gas should be let off, should they?
let me make this wider point.
Murderous regimes with oil, like Saudi Arabia, you always let off.
It would mean, at least in the short term, particularly if you don't get Mr. Sanders in the White House, which I think is a bit of a stretch, turning our backs on America, on our European allies, embracing perhaps Russia and Iran. Could you really sell that to the country?
Well, I'm asking the country to embrace the world, to leave the European Union's failing economies, with all the stresses and strains in the European Union, it's falling apart in front of our eyes, and embrace instead a world where economies are
But
rising.
the trouble is, George, you sound no different from Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Labour Party members and Labour voters just won't buy that. If what we end up having is exactly the same policy that Jacob Rees-Mogg is suggesting,
I didn't
it's not
know
right
that-
for the country, and it's not what party
I
members
didn't
or
know
Labour
that
voters
Comrade
support.
Rees-Mogg had come over to our side of things. If he has, I welcome it. I'd welcome yourself and Michael too.
I didn't know he was in favour of Mr. Sanders in the
I'm
White
not
House.
sure that he is. But the
who knows?
idea, you know, this is not isolationism. It's leaving the European Union and joining the world. Now, if Rees-Mogg says the same thing, well, even a stop clock is right twice a day, and he's right on that if that's what he's saying.
Let me ask you this, a final question since we've got you. If Mr. Corbyn was to become Prime Minister, how likely do you think is he to go in the direction of foreign policy that you've outlined? Does he have the inclination to be that bold, or is he likely to be much more gradual?
He's not as bold as one would have thought he would be. He's under a lot of pressure inside the Parliamentary Labour Party. He doesn't have 24 people amongst his MPs who actually agree with him historically, or even now, perhaps. The Blairites are still there in huge numbers in the PLP. So he's quite cautious, he's quite serene, Zen-like, you might say. And so I don't think if he became Prime Minister, he'd be knocking over the apple carts, kicking over the money changers' tables and so on. But he'd be a steady, slow but steady progress in the direction that I've been describing.
George Galloway, thank you.
Pleasure.
Now it's late, St. Michael of Assisi late. Yes, the blessed Gove, patron saint of small furry things at the Department of the Environment, thinks it's unkind to keep dumb animals cooped up indoors all the time. He wants them to be able to frolic more outside. But politicians shouldn't get too excited. Even the Gulfster's compassion for dumb animals has its limits. So no gambling on the college green for Tory MPs. They'll remain locked in their Westminster crates for the time being, at least until the Maybot can concoct a Brexit policy around which they can rally. So they could be in captivity for some time. Someone who's never followed the herd is Jeff Norcott. Indeed, he's a phenomenon that's rarer on BBC Radio 4 than Hezbollah at a bar mitzvah. A comedian who isn't just funny, that's rare enough on the radio these days, but he's also right of centre, which is not just rare but unheard of. Bonkers, I know. So rather appropriately, he'll be asking if politics has gone bonkers. And if you feel compelled to bleat, moo or cluck a few mindless comments onto the Twitter, the Facebook or the Snap Numpty, feel free, be my guest, pull up a bollard, sit down and tap away. But be aware that unlike the Maybot, I do finish my box sets, so I'll never get round to seeing your dribblings. It's been a week of spy plots and sci-fi movies, of James Bond and Mad Max, of Cold War pasts and dystopian futures, yes, all of that, and the great finger-licking fried chicken furore of 2018. So from deep in the deep fat fryer, here's Jane Moore with a roundup of the week.
Now, here at This Week, we know that Andrew simply won't get into that presenter's chair without first fueling up with a bargain bucket and a couple of gallons of Blue Nun. So when I heard there was a chicken shortage at KFC, I thought I'd better take matters into my own hands. Best get to work.
Oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird. The bird's a winner, well, a bird, bird, bird. Bird is a winner, well, a bird, bird, bird. Well, a bird is a winner, well, a bird, bird, bird. The bird's a winner, well, a bird, bird, bird.
Hello? Oh, yes, an order for the European Research Group. Oh, yes, okay. Hang on a minute. Right, so 62 servings of wings, yeah. Regulatory autonomy for the UK post-Brexit. Okay. UK free to start trade negotiations during the transition period. Okay, yep. Thanks a lot. Give me 20 minutes. Bye. A letter from Jacob Rees-Mogg's brood of Brexit agitators gave Theresa May something rather tough to chew on. Many feathers have been ruffled as the squawking over Brexit continues. But David Davis refused to acknowledge the concerns of Remainers over the potential impact of leaving the EU.
They fear that Brexit could lead to an Anglo-Saxon race to the bottom, with Britain plunged into a Mad Max-style world borrowed from dystopian fiction. These fears about a race to the bottom are based on nothing.
Whilst Damien Green stuck his beak in to call on the government to publish any Brexit impact assessments.
If analysis is being produced, then publish it. And frankly, there will be a big political debate about it. And let's have this argument in public. That's what democracies do.
Brexiteer foxes aside, Theresa May toured TV studios to defend her premiership and to point out that when it comes to running the country, she's still got some eggs in her basket.
I'm doing a job and I'm going to jolly well get on and do it. And what drives me in doing it is actually not what's written, but what people out there want the government to do.
But the crowing didn't last long, with feathers flying yet again over university tuition fees. Amidst a lot of clucking from certain quarters, the PM ruled out scrapping them completely.
Basically, you've got out there people who will benefit from going to university and those who don't. And I think it's right that those who benefit should make a contribution.
The crisis involving Oxfam and Save the Children deepened yesterday as yet more allegations emerged of sexually inappropriate behaviour by charity workers and bosses. Former Chief Executive of Save the Children, Justin Forsyth, is the latest to face accusations on his conduct. MPs heard evidence on Tuesday.
I repeat Oxfam's broader apology and my personal apology. I am sorry, we are sorry for the damage that Oxfam has done, both to the people of Haiti, but also to wider efforts for aid and development by possibly undermining public support.
On the warpath this week was Jeremy Corbyn, who in his speech to the EEF seized the opportunity to roast the banks.
We will take decisions and decisive action to make finance the servant of industry, not the masters of all.
And it wasn't just the financial institutions he was clocked off with. Responding to accusations that he met with spies during the Cold War, he accused the media of foul play. Number 10.
Publishing these ridiculous smears that have been refuted by Czech officials shows just how worried the media bosses are by the prospect of a Labour government. They're right to be.
The electorate will be the judge of that. Oh, it's you. Thanks. Stories where Jeremy Corbyn isn't accused of fraternising with a dodgy regime seem scarcer than a hen's teeth these days. But the leader of the opposition did a valiant attempt to divert attention from himself at PMQs by focusing on Brexit instead.
The Foreign Secretary recently made a speech about Brexit, and he found time to mention carrots, spam, V-signs, stag parties and a plague of boils. Not one mention of Northern Ireland in his speech.
But in her response, the Prime Minister couldn't resist the urge to peck at the open wound.
Can I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman? Because normally he stands up every week and asks me to sign a blank cheque. And I know he likes cheques, but really, that is terribly embarrassing.
In an astonishing display of Chicken Little syndrome, Tory MPs read press reports, then piled into Double O Corbyn to accuse him of, in the words of Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson, being a traitor. Have some sauce, please. MP Ben Bradley's neck was wrung by Corbyn after he posted a tweet accusing the leader of the opposition of selling British secrets to communist spies. Thank you. Right, I better get Andrew's order together. We've run out of chicken.
Jane assures me that the chicken from the other side, fried at Peckham levels that I didn't get to taste, was actually delicious. I think she ate it all. Michael, is this whole Corbyn as a spy stuff, has it rebounded in the end badly on the Tories and the Tory press?
No, I don't think so. I think it offers a glimmer of hope for the Tories to win the election. I think it would be quite difficult to elect as our Prime Minister somebody who was consorting with the IRA, with Palestinian terrorists, with...
Well, it didn't play last time round.
Well, no effort was made last time, because last time the government thought it was going to win effortlessly. And so no real effort was
There were
invested.
lots of prime-time interviews, including one I did when Mr Corbyn was asked very rigorously about his past associations with the IRA. It didn't seem to have traction, even in the middle of an election with a terrorist campaign, which was unprecedented.
But remember that nobody thought Labour was going to win the election, which, of course, they were right to assume. But next time, people will be very aware that Labour may win the election.
But, I mean, haven't the Tories overplayed their hand on this? I mean, we know he's never been a fan of Western foreign policy. We were talking to George Galloway about that. You could even argue, if you wanted, that he's been too cosy with the enemies of the West.
Yes.
But that's nothing to do with betraying our country or being a traitor.
It's
No, but I'm afraid I think it's absolutely enough to lose a general election.
But it's the Tories, as the Defence Minister said, he's betrayed the country.
I mean, it's the idea that he had knew any state secrets is ridiculous. And B, that he would be motivated by money to sell them is even more ridiculous.
So that's what I mean by overplaying their
hand.
hands.
They absolutely have. I mean, there is an important...
Why do you think these agents were interested in talking to Jeremy Corbyn? Of course.
Because they had to justify their salary to their Czech masters.
No, of course they didn't think that Jeremy Corbyn had any state secrets, but they thought it was important to infiltrate the Labour Party, which was the opposition party and might one day become the government party.
Well...
Except that on the files we have no evidence of any of that.
No, we don't. They have overplayed their hand.
But that's
There
what
is
they're
an
there
issue.
to do.
Michael is right to say our foreign policy and our security policy will come under scrutiny at the general election. But by going on this ridiculous spy claim, I think Corbyn is right, it was a smear on him, and I do think it's backfired.
But if he were right, he would offer himself for television interviews. He would allow himself now to be rigorously grilled about his file. But that's not what he's doing at all.
They didn't have a file. They said they didn't have a file,
What he
Michael.
does is he appears and says, I'm threatening the Tory press. If I become Prime Minister, I'm going to gag it in some way.
Well,
now, that also doesn't endear him, I think.
If Mr Corbyn is watching and he's up for an interview, you know where we are. It's 20 months now since the referendum, Michael. It's almost a year since Article 50 was triggered. And Cabinet Ministers spent almost all day in Chequers today, still trying to decide on some of the most basic negotiating positions of this country. Isn't that remarkable?
It is remarkable, but the clock is running not only for us, but also for the European Union.
But they've decided their negotiating position.
They may have decided their negotiating position, but they have not decided the outcome. I mean, as I said to you earlier, I absolutely do not believe there's going to be a hard Brexit. I do not believe that the end of all of this is going to be the imposition of tariffs by the European Union on Britain and by Britain on the European Union. Therefore, something else is going to happen.
All of that may be true, but for any of that to happen, the Europeans need to know what our negotiating position is. And it seems that the government and Mrs May, who seems to be procrastinating on this, we still don't know. Now, the word, Liz, is that the meeting broke up in Chequers, I think, after dinner tonight, a couple of hours ago. Is that and there's the big argument, the big divide seems to be between those who want to diverge if and once we leave from European regulations and doing things, and those that think we have to get access to all the markets, we have to stay roughly aligned, as close as we can. I'm told the divergence got the better of the argument, but there was give and take on both sides. Is that good or bad?
Bad. I'd like us to stay as close as possible. And whether or not May got agreement amongst her cabinet, the real battle is going to be on her backbenches. We heard this week that the Customs and Trade Bill isn't not going to come back to Parliament until after the May elections. There's an amendment put down by Anna Soubry and Kenneth Clarke calling for us to remain in the customs union, and I think Labour will back that. So she's got the people who voted Remain, people like Anna Soubry, Nicky Morgan, then she's got the Jacob Rees-Mogg and the ERG group who want, they want us to stop any kind of negotiation by March 2019. So we would fall out on WTO rules, and she has to make a choice. It's not a fudge, it's a choice.
Maybe the reason that you're right that there won't be a hard Brexit is because in the end there won't be a majority in Parliament for a hard Brexit.
Absolutely right, there isn't.
I think that's coincidentally true, but it's not the reason.
You think it would happen anyway?
Yes, that's not the reason there won't be a hard Brexit. It's just that it is unimaginable that the European Union and Britain are going to erect tariffs when around the rest of the world we're moving in a different direction, with the exception of the United States. But basically we are globalising, and we would find ourselves entirely out of step with the global trend. It's madness.
Just very briefly, I want to ask you, Mark, on tuition fees. Prime Minister came in this week with, in the end, just a review. But what is the sensible politics of entering a bidding war with Labour on this? It's a subject she knows she can't win.
She can't win it, but I just want to say this, that of course the reason this has gone badly wrong is this is the most unconservative policy that has ever been invented. Because whether you're selling a rusty bicycle or whether you're selling a Rolls Royce, they cost the same amount of money. A lousy degree in a lousy university and a top degree in a top university have all been priced at $9,250. So the customer, the student, has absolutely no power whatsoever. How can a Conservative party have invented such a daft, nay, quasi-communist system?
I thought it was Labour that invented it.
Well, we pushed it up to 9,000.
Very well. Winston Churchill once said, a politician needs the ability to foretell what is going to happen and the ability afterwards to explain why it didn't happen. Even by recent standards, it's been quite a week. David Davis invoking the spirit of the Thunderdome to assure us that Brexit won't be as bad as Mad Max. That's all right then. An earthquake in Swansea. Not a sentence you thought you'd ever hear. And rather than taking guns off killers in the wake of yet another school shooting. The President of the United States has said that arming teachers could be the answer. Just as well, that wasn't the policy when Mrs. McGregor was teaching us maths in the lower fourth. She was a dab hand at whacking your knuckles with a ruler. Who knows what she might have done with a Colt 45. So has the world gone bonkers? Almost certainly. That's why we're putting bonkers in the spotlight.
Bonkers.
Is it just me, or has the world gone crazy?
No!
KFC plunged fast food lovers into despair after a chicken shortage led to consumer chaos.
I've had to go to Burger King.
It's what?
Ridiculous. Surely there's enough chickens.
And was it just a little bit bonkers?
Bonkers.
To see the Queen at London Fashion Week? Her Madge noted the conditions were rather hard underfoot, though the course seemed quite straightforward. And just how crazy do you have to be to give birth to your child on air?
Hi, buddy.
As US radio presenter Cassidy Proctor did this week. She even got the audience to name her newborn. Meanwhile, Theresa May says her life is so bonkers she can't even find the time to finish a box set.
I never get to the end of the box set. That's
You never managed it.
For UKIP at least, another leader down, the shambles is nothing new.
I'm constantly being told by political experts that UKIP is finished and that nobody really cares anymore. Nobody knows what its purpose is.
But what of serious politics? Is it bonkers that we have to look to grime musician Stormzy to hold the Prime Minister to account? The artist took a swipe at Theresa May at the Brits last night over her handling of the Grenfell Tower tragedy.
Yo, Theresa May, where's the money for Grenfell? Well, you thought we just forgot about Grenfell, you criminals, and you got the truth to call us savages.
Comedian Jeff Knockout thinks times like these call for a cool head. But can anyone make sense of this madness? Well, who better to make sense than Jeff Knockout, who's with us now. Welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me on.
So KFC runs out of chicken. Mr. Trump wants to arm teachers. We are going bonkers.
It jumped the shark this week, didn't it? And I think that clip with Stormzy as well. There was a headline today that said Theresa May hits back at Stormzy. And because of the atmosphere we're in, I did think for 1 second that she'd done it in the form of rap. I could just imagine her on the steps of Number 10 with Michael Gove beatboxing. But it's sort of a symptom of the times that we're living in. I mean,
terrifying image.
It's
isn't it slightly bonkers that she responded to Stormzy?
Yeah, it's but there's all this week it's been things like that happening with Corbyn as well, delivering this kind of warning to the press to prove that he's not a sort of rabid revolutionary. He threatened to control the free press, which is a great way of coming back against your critics. But there was a lot of things that Corbyn said in that video which I think were actually fair. But what was odd about it was the intensity, I think, in his eyes, because for a pacifist, he looked like he wanted to punch someone, didn't he? He looked like he was ready to come out swinging. And you showed, I mean, Henry Bolton, there's got to be a point.
The UKIP former.
Yeah, the former UKIP. When you're sitting on the sofa with Phil and Holly and a woman half your age who's a racist, you've got to think, I haven't made brilliant decisions here. You know, I was in the running to be a leader of a party, and here I am on This Morning.
But what is it that's making us bonkers?
It's elections.
And even our politicians are going bonkers.
I think it's elections. It's pressure. I mean, if you look at it going back from 2014, 15, these have all been unexpected results. Which puts the pressure on politicians. There's no comfort zone anymore. Social media, I mean, we could all be memes and hashtags by the time we get back to the green room.
Or worse.
I know, a lot worse.
We will be.
In my case, yeah. Or dressed as a chicken. And I think that creates pressure makes mistakes, doesn't it? When people are under pressure, they sort of shoot from the hip.
Don't you think it's just more exposed now? We just didn't know what was going on with our politicians 24/7. 20, 30 years ago.
I think you're right about the elections, but what you're really saying is lack of leadership. It's people who don't know their own minds, who are unprepared to say what they think, who are trying to react to what other people have already decided.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that with Trump, the on and off response to the gun thing. He's dependent on the gun lobby, so
but I think it's
doesn't
not
have a view of his own.
I think it's not just the elections, it's been the results. Because, with Mr. Trump winning in America, Mrs. May failing to increase her majority here, Macron coming from nowhere to win in France. Mrs. Merkel still struggling to try to put together a coalition. It's all the results have really been a kick in the teeth.
Well, no one can get their feet under the table. I mean, you think back to the sort of Blair years. I mean, how long does it seem since people could just win an election and be an MP for 5 years and get on with the job? I mean, you've got 5 minutes before, you know, you're getting hounded on Twitter constantly. And there's also this, you know, there's just a general tribalism as well, which is slightly distortive. I had a clip about Corbyn which went viral earlier this week, and it was really interesting on my Facebook fan page was that I had a lot of people review me off the back of it. There were 25 5-star reviews and 10 1-star reviews, and absolutely nothing in the middle.
So that's a divided.
Nobody. I mean, personally,
discourse.
I've always thought I'm a solid 3.7 stars, but that's by the by. But it was almost a symptom of the age that the dialogue and the political discourse is being dominated by the fringe ends.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you can't. I think being calm, reasonable, trying to build consensus, bring people together, just doesn't cut it anymore. It's not fashionable in politics.
But the mainstream is discombobulated, to use a good American word, isn't it? It's discombobulated now.
It is absolutely discombobulated, but as I say, that there aren't people who know their own minds and are prepared to tell us what they think and where they want to take us. They are to go from discombobulated, they are just bobbing around on a sea of public opinion, which is constantly changing and moving.
I would suggest we're going to stay bonkers for quite some time.
Yes.
Well, I hope so. For comedy, it's absolutely brilliant. So,
well, never mind the country.
the further the country descends into madness, it certainly gives you the odd joke to write.
What are you up to these days?
Well, I'm on tour. I've got my tour of Traditionalism, which is going around the country at the moment, and we just extended into the autumn as well. So it's really interesting. I mean, although I voted Conservative and I voted Leave, I was in Leicester on Monday, and there was loads of Labour. I know, and loads of Labour Remain voters that came and sat up the front. And
the Leicester Comedy Festival.
Yeah, Leicester Comedy Festival. Interestingly, all the Leavers sat at the back,
Brilliant
which I presume that was for a sharp exit. But it's really nice, and I think, like you say, it's much better when you get diversity in the audience. I personally, I'm not in this to create my own echo chamber, so I'm glad. All lefties are welcome. Anybody arriving in a beret, I'll let you in. I don't mind anybody.
But does the audience that goes there knows that your kind of USP is being right of centre?
I think they want to be triggered. In a way, there was a woman in Leicester that I kept calling her madam, and then she called me out on that because she said it was ageist and class sensitive as well. I haven't heard that one, class sensitive. So I said, all right, Treacle, I'll call you something else. That didn't go down very well, I've got to be honest.
Really? That's a surprise.
I know, it's weird, isn't it?
Jeff, great to have you with us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And that's your lot for tonight, but not for us. We're off to Lulu's as usual, where it's Mad Max theme night, giving Michael yet another excuse to dress up in his tight, studied, ripped leather biker gear, plus David Davis mask, leaving Liz free to mull on life in a dystopian world of no hope, no future, no purpose. Come to think of it, since the Brexit referendum and Jez's takeover of her party, that's been pretty much what she's been living through anyway. So tonight will just be another normal night for her. But we leave you tonight on a more serious note, with the words of Andrew Pollock. His daughter, Meadow, was shot dead in Florida last week, and yet another mass school shooting of the sort which seems to have become quotidian in the United States, and to which American politicians seem incapable of responding with any action, just the ritual thoughts and prayers for the victims and their loved ones. This is part of Mr. Pollock's speech at Donald Trump's listening session last night.
We, as a country, failed our children. This shouldn't happen. I'm very angry that this happened, because it keeps happening. How many schools, how many children have to get shot? I want it to sink in, not forget about this. We can't forget about it. All the school shootings, it doesn't make sense. Fix it. Should have been one school shooting, and we should have fixed it. And I'm pissed, because my daughter I'm not going to see again. She's not here. Never, ever will I see my kid. That's how I want it to sink in. It's eternity. My beautiful daughter I'm never going to see again.